All right, so I would like to welcome you all into this next session. This next session is Nature and the Nature of Resilience. So we're first going to have a presentation by Sheppard, who is the creator of the embodied present process that helps people reunite the thinking of the head with the deep, present and calm intelligence of the body. He is also the author of books such as New Self, New World and Radical Wholeness. And after he's done his presentation, he'll be joined for a discussion by Dr. Adrian Harris. Would you like me to introduce you now, Adrian? You can unmute yourself.
Yeah, yes.
All right.
Go ahead and find it.
All right, so Dr. Adrian Harris is a psychotherapist and embodiment theorist with over 20 years of meditation practice and trained in experiential focusing. His PhD explored embodied knowing, and for his master's thesis, he researched psychotherapy in nature. So both of you are very welcome, and I would like to give the floor to Sheppard.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you so much. I'd like to divide the half hour roughly into thirds. So I'd love a chance to speak to resilience from my body of work and how I understand that. Then I'd love to talk us through a practice that my hope is it will speak to resilience and strengthen your foundation of resilience. And then I'd love, but before our talk with the conversation with Dr. Harris, I'd love to open the floor to questions, which is probably my favorite part of this, because especially questions that I haven't thought of really feed and nourish my own clarity. So when I think of resilience, I think of life. I mean, life is astoundingly resilient. You think it began 3.5 billion years ago on this planet, and it has survived meteor strikes and ice ages and mass extinctions and the introduction of oxygen, which was toxic to life at the time, and volcanic eruptions. And so there's that, life itself, but then think about your ancestors and their resilience, because the line of your personal ancestry hasn't been broken once in over 3 billion years. And if it had been, you wouldn't be here today. So all of your ancestors were resilient enough to survive and birth the next generation, from the first life that appeared on Earth through species evolution and predators and hunger, persisting through to this very moment, and here you are. So life is resilient. And at the moment it has to be because of COVID-19 and all that it brings in its wake. It's thrown our human society into upheaval. It's brought the engines of economic progress to their knees. But it's interesting, while our world is brought to a standstill, the story with nature is very different. The birds outside my window are chirping away, getting on with it. The green shoots are pushing up through the earth. Buds are ripening on branches. So in most ways, nature is doing better with the lockdown. I don't think the air has been this clean in decades. Animals are appearing on city streets where they haven't set foot before. So there's this kind of ironic thing that as our human enterprises go into paralysis, nature is breathing a sigh of relief. And that underscores the resilience of life. It is forever being assailed. And in the face of that, it is adapting. Nature is a process of becoming. Now, we've got a funny perspective on nature. We think that process of becoming operates on the principle of the survival of the fittest. And that principle just happens to conveniently justify our own dominating behavior in the world. But the phrase is meaningless. There's no measure of fitness. So, there are times when the biggest and the strongest perish, as the dinosaurs did. Fitness is something we can only define after the fact. Whatever survives proves itself the fittest. So to speak of survival of the fittest is just to speak of survival of whatever happens to survive. Nature, the resilience of nature, actually relies on a different principle. And the principle I see working through nature is survival of the most harmonious. Whatever can best harmonize with its environment will stand the best chance of surviving. So the resilience of nature, the resilience of life, the resilience of our lives is about those harmonizing relationships. So that leads to a funny and I think illuminating question. What's more important? Worms, trees, clouds, or fungi? I mean, the question is illuminating because of the absurdity of it. Every part of the whole of nature is harmonizing with every other part. It makes no sense to say one part is more important than another part. But then we can turn the tables on that question and ask, what's more important, humans or animals? And suddenly it's not an absurd question. It's a question with an obvious answer. So you take it further. What's more important, cities or insects? What's more important, the economy or forests? Or even what's more important, whales or a corporation's bottom line? And our actions around the globe provide the answers to those questions. So here's another thing to understand about resilience. If life is resilient, then what goes against life, what denies relationship and refuses to harmonize, will undermine resilience. And, the questions, what's more important, human or animals, those questions would be absurd to us if we understood ourselves to be part of nature. Instead, we want to stand back from it and control and dominate it. We want to believe that survival of the fittest is actually a meaningful phrase, and that we humans have inherited the mantle of the fittest. But consider this, our denial of relationship and our refusal to harmonize have created a culture of disconnection. In our culture, we disconnect from the consequences of our actions because in our eyes, we're more important than the web of life that sustains us. But our disconnections go way, way beyond that. We disconnect from our bodies. We disconnect from the intelligence of the breath, from our neighbors and our neighborhoods, from the wild outdoors. We retreat, not just into houses and into ourselves, but into our heads, as though the more we withdraw and disconnect, the safer we'll be. And, world mythology frames that disconnection, that withdrawal. Joseph Campbell, I think, really put his finger on it because he spoke about the tyrant in world mythology, and he characterized the tyrant as the man of self-achieved independence. And you listen to that phrase, and I mean, that's the American dream. Self-achieved independence. That's what we're taught to long for and seek to achieve. It's a fantasy, because there's no such thing as independence. You can't point to a single example anywhere in the cosmos of independence, and yet it's a fantasy that we implacably chase and want to make real. So our impulse to disconnect is the impulse of the mythological tyrant, and it is ruinous. It helps to recognize that it is contrary to life. It is against life. It's a denial of relationship. It's a refusal to harmonize. And so that very impulse that pushes us to self-achieved independence, to disconnect, is undermining resilience. If resilience is life, what is against life undermines resilience. And you can see the deterioration of resilience on a global scale. Extinction rates are accelerating. We are corroding the resilience of this life on Earth in our opposition to life. So it shows up not just on a global scale, but in our personal lives as well. When you disconnect from your body, when you withdraw from the world around you, you're disconnecting from your being. And the security of your being is the only real security you have. It's the source of your resilience. It's the truth that you return to. And when you disconnect from being, the security of your being becomes unattainable. And the more you chase this agenda of disconnection, the more successful you are at disconnection, the more you're going to feel isolated and alienated and alone and anxious. I mean, that's what we're heading to as we seek to disconnect. And it's pretty much our normal state in the 21st century. Anxiety courses through our lives like an underground stream. So the anxiety that's coming to the surface during this crisis, it's not a new thing. The COVID virus is like a strobe of lightning that reveals it and amplifies it. So what COVID does, I think, is it presents us with a new opportunity to address that state of disconnection and establish a deeper resilience. So, I mean, it stands to reason that if disconnection undermines our resilience, what is the journey that eases us back into the relationships we've sacrificed? And for me, that journey begins by coming back to the body, for it's through the body that all relationships are felt. It's through the body that we attune to the harmony of the world. It's through the body that we return to the security of our being and to the truth and resilience of our life. So I'd like to talk us through a little practice that I'm hoping can help with that remembrance and deepen your resilience. And then after the practice, we'll open the floor to questions. So in our culture, we desensitize ourselves to wholeness. So I'd like to begin by inviting you to relax into the wholeness of your body. Just that. What does it mean to feel the body in its wholeness? To feel the soles of your feet, the backs of your calves, your thighs, your belly, your chest, the top of your head, your upper arms, your forearms, your hands, your toes. It's a surrender to drop into that wholeness. It's not something you can achieve because the wholeness is already there. What's asked of you is a surrender that softens you into it. And then can you feel that wholeness, not from the outside, not as though you're sitting on top of it in the head looking down at it. Can you drop into that wholeness and feel the wholeness of the body from the inside? And just take a moment to see how deeply you can come to rest in the sense of your being, your body in its wholeness. And as you're resting in the wholeness of the body, discover for yourself what it means to trust the body's intelligence. So for example, your body has known how to breathe since the day you were born. And we override the body's intelligence and we make it breathe the way we need it to, or the way it keeps us in fear, or whatever it might be. And what happens if you undo all the supervision on the breath? And in that sense of its wholeness, you allow the body to take over, and you allow that to happen easily and gently. And there's a sense that the whole of the body can be available to the breath. The body is fluid, and the breath is a wave that travels down through the legs to the toes, travels up through the body to the top of the head, down through the arms to the fingertips. And undo, 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 until there is the sense that you are being breathed. And allow yourself to dwell within that experience without needing in any way to take charge of it. And then I'd invite you, as you come to rest in the body, to just feel within its wholeness any parts of the body that aren't at rest on the earth. In our culture, we are taught to mistrust the earth. We have a scale of values that tells us up is good and down is bad. You're looking up today. We know what that means. And we hold that scale of values in our body. We hold our energy away from the earth. We've demonized the earth and we've deified the sky. Hell is beneath our feet. Heaven is above the clouds. And how to recognize the ways in which that lives within your neurology, the ways in which that is holding your energy away from the earth. And just feel that energy without any judgment. Notice where it is. And allow the breath to permeate it. And as the breath suffuses that energy, you'll feel it soften and it may begin to descend through the body, gently, gently, the way a light drizzle falls to the earth. And still continue to notice any ways in which your energy is not at rest, has not joined the earth. and find that connection that enables you to feel yourself completely at rest on the mother beneath your feet. And as you come to rest in that way, just notice how that feels. You may find you have landed in a strength that doesn't so much belong to you as it belongs to your union with the world, with the present. And for me, that strength of your being in the present moment is the source of resilience. So we'll bring the practice to a close, I hope without abandoning it. I hope you can remain with a sense of the wholeness of your body, the sense of the breath softening through it all and being at rest on the earth. And I would love to, I'd love to open the floor to questions. If anyone's willing to comment or question, we have time for that. And Julie, I guess are you able to see hands, if hands raised, or?
Yes, so you can either type your question in the chat box, or if you go to the participants tab, you'll see a blue hand symbol. So if you click on that, you can raise your hand virtually, we'll unmute you, and you can say your question.
And I might also add that if you don't want to type the whole question, you could just type, I have a question, and maybe Julie could find you and unmute you.
So there's one question in the chat box. Any advice for supporting resilience at work?
It's so important to not underestimate the ways in which our manufactured environments encourage disconnection. And what we just did, there is in that disconnection that happens, the disconnection is a commitment to doing. It leaves being behind. It sort of says, I don't need being, I just need to get this thing done. And as you leave being, there is a contraction into doing. And you can feel your world contracting. And the little screens we're sharing at the moment, they titillate the abstract faculties that we have coronated within our intelligence, and the contraction takes over. So being is a dilation. You can feel your awareness gently dilate into the world, and here you are. And to support resilience at work is to find a way to ground yourself in the present when all around you is urging you to leave it. And I'm not saying it's an easy thing, but to understand the effect of your environment on you is to at least be able to forge an alternative, to gain new choice. How do I guide myself if I lose my resilience and rest through my pain and distraction? I'd offer another perspective on that. Our cultural obsession is organizing. We organize everything. We organize our thoughts. We organize our emotions so we have the right ones. We organize our relationships and our careers. We organize everything. There's a place for organizing, but if you are organizing yourself, you are making it impossible to be present. I think the quality of being present is the quality of feeling yourself being organized by it. And if you've taken charge, that's impossible. So I just, it's a really, really good question, but I'd encourage you to reframe it from how do I guide myself to how do I soften into the world and come into relationship with it such that you find guidance there. If you soften into the world's harmonies, they are whispering to you at every moment. There is infinite guidance there. And as long as you're in that position of guiding yourself, you're in a divided state where one part of you is looking for the answers to assert on the other part. So it's not much of an answer. It's more of an alternative that I'm hoping you might begin to explore. How do you tend the natural inclination to connect physically with a hug when all the information we're receiving is just 6 feet minimum apart? I think. Well, I go to mirror neurons. If you are in your wholeness and you bring the whole of your attention to another person's being, you will be with them in a profound, intimate, quiet way. And so, I mean, hugs are wonderful, but it's sort of, that restriction in a way opens the space for another kind of presence with someone else that in some ways, I think may be deeper. Key is your view that a key part of restoration of Earth will be to restore matriarchy. No, I don't. I don't think matriarchy is the answer. I think that in the evolution of our consciousness, we began in a culture that was gathered around the mother at a time when our awareness was seated in the pelvic bowl. And you can see in language and history how the center of our awareness rose up through the body into the head. And I don't think the way forward is backwards to matriarchy. I think the way forward is to honor within ourselves the poles of our intelligence, that brilliant abstracting intelligence of the head and the connected relational intelligence of the pelvic bowl. And when they come into harmony and balance, then our intelligence will be felt no longer as a localized phenomenon, either in the pelvic bowl or the head. It will be felt as an axis of exchange that runs through the body. So we have a long way to go to overcome our demeaning and neglect and mistrust of the female. But I think that as we do recover the wholeness of the body, we come back into balance in ourselves. And when there's a balance in the self, how could you be out of balance in your relationships? At least that's my hope. And we are at the end of the half hour. And I so look forward to bringing Adrian in for a conversation.
Thank you so much. This is incredibly rich, and I know that there will be more questions coming in, and I'm really looking forward to the next half hour. Dr. Adrian Harris, you are welcome to unmute yourself and join this conversation.
Thank you, and thank you, Philip, for bringing your wisdom to us today. I think it's been a very rich session, and especially the practical session that you did. You guided us through there. I felt that really brought it all to life for me. I think there's a lot of juice in that way of practicing. one of the things it brought to mind of just before I came on, I went out and did some nature connection, which is what I do whenever I get the chance to. And my sense is when I go into nature and I use my senses and I allow my awareness and my attention to drop into the body then kind of opens up. It's like the body is very porous and it opens up and you can feel that connection with the natural world that's around. And there's a lot of wisdom and nourishment that can come from that. I wondered how that fits in with this sense of the relational pelvic bowl and that connection you've been talking about, Philip.
I love the word porous. It reminds me there's a tribe in Africa, the Anglo-Ewe, that I speak about in my book, Radical Wholeness. And anthropologists have described their porosity of being. And another phrase that's applied to them is they have a radical indeterminacy of selfhood, of personhood. And radical indeterminacy of selfhood, it sounds like a nightmare to us. But what that rests on, as I understand it, is that our cultural idea that you discover who you are by delving deep within you, and it's like a gold coin waiting there, is really erroneous. Inner work is crucial, but it's not about discovering your truth. It's about integrating what compromises the spaciousness of your being. And I really feel the body as a resonator. When it's empty like a crystal bell, it resonates to the world. And the truth of your life, the truth of who you are, is revealed through relationship. When you come into relationship with a blade of grass and it's a felt relationship, who you are is illuminated in a particular way. When you come into relationship with birdsong, who you are is illuminated in a particular way. So we discover ourselves through relationship. And the more deeply you come into felt relationship with the world, and especially with nature, the more deeply you discover who you truly are. And it's always there waiting for us. And that permeability, the porosity, enables us to shift our cultural inclination, because we are so used to learning about nature. And instead, we recognize nature as our greatest teacher, and we begin to learn from nature.
I'm wondering, do you know the work of a philosopher called Andy Clark? Is that name familiar? Well, he talks about the skin bag body. Now, this is the skin bag body, but the skin bag body isn't it. It's actually porous, as I say, like the the tribe you're talking about. They get it. They really get it, because the neuroscience is telling us now that that's the way that we are.
Yeah. So sorry to interrupt, but one of my go-to metaphors for what am I is a whirlpool in a river. And the river is always coursing through it. It is the movement of the river through it that keeps the form of the whirlpool intact. But there's nothing that is a permanent part of the whirlpool. And in the same way, the world is always coursing through us. With every in-breath, I'm taking into my body the exhalations of forests, and they're turning into me. And then I breathe out, and the exhalation is a gift of carbon dioxide that will in turn become wood fiber in trees. I am always becoming the world, and the world is always turning into me. And as we retract into the sort of tyrannical independence that our culture encourages, we baffle our sensitivity to porosity. So it's not that the porosity goes away, it's that we desensitize to it. And we desensitize to the wholeness of the world that cradles us. It's not that the wholeness goes away, we just stop feeling it. And we've so demeaned feeling and elevated reason that sensitivity has become like an afterthought, but it's sort of nice to have if you're looking at art, and that's about it. And I think sensitivity is the foundation of our intelligence. Any sensitivity is a form of intelligence, whether it's a sensitivity to birdsong or color or a child's tears. And a sensitivity is necessarily reactive. You know, the retina wouldn't see if it didn't react to light. So that sensitivity has to be grounded to become coherent. So I think intelligence, our true intelligence, is the state of grounded sensitivity. And the return to the body is return to an intelligence in which the whole of your being is recognized as an intelligent field. And there is no body bag separating you from the world.
I sometimes use the word embodied wisdom. That ties in very much with what you're saying. I'm bringing this back to the whole resilience question, which we're all being faced with right now. I think if we can allow our intelligence to sink down into our bodies and tap into that embodied wisdom, there's a lot of nurturing there and a real ability to find some guidance through all this.
Yeah, and the nurturing, just to make a little distinction, the nurturing for me isn't a self-nurturing. It's when you come back to the body, you come back to what the body most deeply understands. And for me, what it most deeply understands is that it belongs to the world. And it finds kinship everywhere and is nourished by that kinship. And that, you know, the disconnection that our culture encourages, that I spoke of earlier, thwarts that kinship. We stop feeling kinship, and what we see around us are basically machines. You know, you think a tree is just a machine that performs certain functions, as is a squirrel, or, you know, and that mechanical worldview, I think has been seductive to us, because a machine is the only thing we completely understand. We understand how to build it, how to repair it, how to modify it, how to improve it, completely understand the machine. So we want to turn the world into something mechanical that we can completely understand. And that eclipses our ability to feel wholeness, because you can't feel the world in its wholeness until you can feel the mystery that makes it whole. Or at least that's my experience.
Yeah. I think that's all. We're all completely on the same page with all this. I think what I want to bring in is there's so much coming in now that's reinforcing, that's with us. I've been looking at some of the forest bathing has such a lot of wisdom in it, and there's a lot of work being done on mindfulness in nature and nature connection. There's so many tools, some of the things I'm sure we've been talking about in other people today, that allow us to overcome that separation and that disconnection that you've been talking about, and really get, in a very embodied way, the fact that we are part of everything else and have that connection. And that the kind of tools, the kind of strategies, the kind of approaches that I'm hearing about and doing myself from places like forest bathing, eco-psychology, mindfulness in nature, all those are so valuable. So I would say to people, learn about these things, embrace them, go out into your local park if you can't get any into more wild nature, and really open up to it and really tune in and let that soak in and nurture you.
Yeah, and what I also like to point to, our paradigm of disembodiment is thousands of years old, and there's a sort of unseen impediment for me to coming back to the body, which is the understanding that embodiment is about listening to the body. And for me, the metaphor of listening to the body is basically telling us that there's a wall separating you from the body, and you live in the head, and the best you can do is to put your ear to that wall to find out what's going on the other side. And that, you know, the irony is that the phrase "listen to the body" is trying to ease us into embodiment, and it's actually more deeply entrenching the divide we've habituated to. So, you know, the alternative to that, which is where my work moves, is to listen to the world through the body. And in order to listen to the world through the body, you need that porosity, you need the spaciousness that allows your being to resonate to the world. And you need to begin to recognize that thinking and being don't belong in separate compartments. So we've been drilled to understand that thinking can happen best when it's in the head and you've sort of shut off all the noise below the neck. And that's a wound that we carry within us, that thinking and being have been sundered. So thinking is felt through the body. Every thought resonates through the body like a note of music through a cavern. And as it resonates through the body, it is clarified. So to think with the whole of your being is to recognize every sensation as thought. We're married to the idea that thought needs language. And no, the body thinks in a million ways that don't depend on language. And when you recognize sensation as thought, and when you feel thought sensationally, you've healed that wound that we carry between our thinking and our being.
What's coming to mind is the senses, how we use the senses. I mean, our culture is classic. It's, well, we're sitting here. What are we doing? We're looking at each other, and we're just using the audio visual. But out in the world, it's about touch, it's about smell, it's about all those other senses that can come in. There's a guy, an eco-psychologist who reckons there's probably about 60 different senses that we in our everyday lives, we kind of simplify it right down, and it's like, oh, well, I can see what you mean, or all that kind of language. But let's open up our senses, really trust them, really expand out, and turn the volume up on all of your sensory awareness. I think that's really healing.
Yeah, and it helps to know that the body processes 1 billion times more information than we can be consciously aware of. There is a currency of information flowing through your body in every moment. And it's not information that we can necessarily objectify. You can't access it except in a very, very partial, tiny way from the head, but you can feel all of that information. It's like you can't know wholeness. You can't objectively know it. It's just not possible, but you can feel it. And I think our denigration of feeling is part of what has desensitized us to those relationships that hold us, to that web of life that cradles ours and sustains it.
And just, I guess we're coming closer to the end. I wanted to bring that together into the frame of of working with resilience, that there is that what I would call the wisdom of the body, or we can call it whatever we like, that's there, that's we can drop into that, really drop into that and be with that.
Yeah, and the strategy that we've been handed is to let the head take charge, to let that intelligence take over and override the body and sort it out. And the problem is that that intelligence runs round and round in loops, that it retraces and retraces. And if you can soften out of the head into the teeming intelligence of the body, then you're not relying on your ability to sort it out. You are feeling what is right now in the whole of the world. And there is no rational form of moving forward that can even approximate the subtlety and trueness of what the body can attune to.
Yeah, some of the ideas of Taoism come to mind. It's almost like we're dropping into the fullness of the Tao and sensing into that.
Yeah.
And that flow, you use the word flow there, that's exactly what it is, isn't it?
Yeah, and even in the Western tradition, in 500 BC, Heraclitus wrote of the Logos, and the Logos he called the thought that steers all things through all things. And to drop into the body is to be able to land on that flow and ride it as a surfer rides a wave. And it's such a different, such a grounded, easeful way to move forward. We're so used to thinking our way forward, and we're barely aware of the option that presents itself, that you can be present with the whole of your being and feel your way forward, hand in hand with the world.
It's kind of a very subtle intuition. That's kind of how I think about it. Just thinking about the question you had earlier about bringing resilience to work. There is that tendency to try and overthink things. And I think if we can drop into that embodied wisdom, then something else emerges. You can be with the difficulty, the challenge, whatever's going on for you in a different, fuller, and more grounded way.
Yeah, and you know what? You can't outthink life. You can't do it, but you can feel it and join it. And I think that's what brings us back to resilience. Yeah.
Good. How are we for time? Because we're gonna have a breakout session, or what's the?
We've got 10 minutes,
okay.
And you can choose what to do with this time. We can invite people into breakout rooms, or you can keep having this conversation here. There have also been a couple of questions in the chat, at least a couple.
Okay, good. I can imagine. Philip,
drop into the body and see where it takes you, Adrian.
Okay, my sense is, let's open this up. There's already questions coming up. Should we open up and see what questions come up, and we can respond and see what comes out of that?
Yeah, I'd love to.
So there's a question from Sabine. I'm not sure that it is easy for many people to simply drop into their bodies when cultural conditioning is desensitizing in so many ways.
Oh, Sabine, that is so true. The problem is our neurology has been shaped by our culture, and the journey of recovering, our journey to recovering that sensitivity is to sit up in the head and direct it, to guide ourselves into it. And Joseph Campbell spoke of the hero as the man of self-achieved independence. He spoke of the tyrant as the man of self-achieved independence. The hero he described as the man or woman of self-achieved submission. And that like violates our understanding of what heroic is, but the journey that you speak of is the hero's journey. It is the journey that leaves what Joseph Campbell called the organized inadequacy of our lives. I just think it's a brilliant phrase, because that cultural obsession to organize everything, including our journey into sensitivity, thwarts the very pulse of life that we want to return to. So what is the nature of the hero's submission? It is a submission to what is. It's a submission that happens primarily through the body. And we have confounded and baffled the body in so many ways. It's a journey that requires gentleness above all. And to me, gentleness is the quality of felt relationship. You know, when you move a baby's arm into a sweater, it's your gentleness that enables you to come into relationship with the baby and sort of dance it into the sweater. So how to be gentle with your breath, how to be gentle with your thoughts, how to land gently on the earth beneath your feet, how to be gentle enough with yourself that you allow yourself to pause rather than being caught and carried away by a stale pattern. And that quality of just pausing, of giving yourself the grace and permission to pause, will open new avenues. Yeah, it's not an easy journey. I'm glad you, thank you.
Absolutely. It's not an easy journey, and we are caught in this kind of cultural trance, but there's so many, I call them pathways of connection that we have there. A lot of them have been discussed today. Dance is a brilliant way of just dropping into the body through that release. There's mindfulness, especially in nature, it's very supportive of that. There's sensory awareness. There's lots of ways, and exactly the approach that Philip was showing us earlier. There are ways of overcoming that cultural kind of blocking off that happens. Just allowing us to learn those and trust those strategies and take the journey.
Yeah, thank you, Adrian. There's another question I just noticed from Ariana. Do you think that society will be more conscious about nature? I think that the way forward for us cannot be implemented in a top-down manner. We've tried top-down for thousands of years, and it's pushed us into a sort of dead end. I think each of us is called to come back to the body, to come back to the present. And as we reclaim the body's sensitivities, we recognize nature as our relatives, as ourselves, as something that in no way are we separated from. So I absolutely do think and hope that by resensitizing the flesh of the body to the world around it, we will find guidance in nature rather than just resources to exploit.
I suppose we can only hope. There does seem to be, just from looking at what's going on in the world and things I'm reading, there does seem to be more awareness of how vital our connection to the natural world is. So this could be a kind of some crisis from which we can emerge with more wholeness. But time will tell.
Yeah, I mean, the problem is that when you are blind to wholeness, you're blind to reality. Because all there is wholeness. Everything affects everything. Everything leans on everything. Everything depends on everything. There's nothing that isn't part of the wholeness. So to be blind to reality means that with every action you risk damaging what you cannot see. And that's sort of been the course of our civilization, the ruinous trail of destruction on this one jewel of a planet we have. So you know, how to reclaim our ability not just to feel the whole, but to feel it as an intimate part of our lives, which it is. And then to find guidance there rather than asserting guidance with that segregated intelligence in the head. Samada, I just thought we could maybe get Samada in, who's raised her hand.
Yes, sure. Oh, just a moment. Samata, there we go. You're on, Samata.
Yes, so I'm in India and I'm just so moved by this conversation, and because I've lived in the Western world for the past 18 years, and it's just heartening to really see, because I believe the Western world is more systematically designed for disconnection. And I really feel it, because when I came back home to India, I just kind of relaxed in my body, because there is a degree of acceptance, and the porousness exists in the society, the way we are built. So I'm just very, very grateful for you to have brought in, with such beauty and precision, very great spiritual truths. And you spoke them so eloquently. So I just want to recognize and acknowledge that.
I appreciate that. And maybe in the seconds left, I can tell you one of my most wonderful meals was in the south of India with a troupe of Kathakali actors. And there were no boundaries anywhere. It was just this sharing and this communion. And then I came back home, and here's my placemat, and here's my chair. And if Sally wants the salt, she has to ask me to pass it through my space, because God forbid that she should cross my space to get the salt. And it's just, yeah, we've divided and divided. And
Philip, I love you. You're a poet, but there are boundaries here. It is 6 o'clock. And people are going to need a break before the next session, okay? So you're a gorgeous man, and I love the things you say, and I'm going to call an end there, just because we are going to need to take a break. So
I knew it was coming.
You know me, man. So, yeah.